Hey everyone, welcome back to the Pro MMA Betting Podcast. I thought I'd drop another podcast in this week. I've already done the UFC, but we've got Cage Warriors on Saturday night as well. So I've never seen a Cage Warriors podcast before. I'm a big fan of Cage Warriors. I live in London in the UK, so it's a homegrown show for me. I've been watching it for many years. It's a very well matched show, great matchmaking, run very professionally. I really like the show, and it's proven to be a great feeder show for the UFC. I think they are approaching 100 fighters that have fought on Cage Warriors that have ended up going on to the UFC. So it's a great proving ground, great opportunity to show how good you are. Let everyone out there know it's available on Fight Pass as well, so there's good access for people to watch the show who you are, and then if you're good enough, make that next step up to the UFC. So if we have a look at the card on Saturday, I'm only going to cover the main card. I am, as you know now, a bettor, so this podcast, or all my podcasts, are breakdowns of fights, but we also look at them from a betting perspective as well. So I'm not going to bother with the fights that are on the undercard because we won't get betting odds for them. We're only going to get odds for the main card. So I'm going to go off the Cage Warriors website, which I always use because they always put the broadcast details on there. So there's 5 fights on the main card. First one is Scott Malone versus Josh Reed. Now the show is in Cardiff, which is in Wales. It's the biggest Cage Warriors show they've ever had. The card is stacked from top to bottom. It's the 100th show. Scott Malone is from Scotland. Josh Reed is going to be the hometown fighter, being from Wales. Scott Malone looks like a very good prospect. I was very impressed with him in his last fight against Adam Amersinger. Adam is the brother of Dean, who some of you may recall. He was on The Ultimate Fighter, fought on the UK MMA scene back in the day. I don't think he's fought for a few years now. He's more of a trainer now. Adam was really hyped coming into that fight. Unbeaten amateur background. He was unbeaten as a professional. I did tape on him for that fight, and he looked like someone that had a very well-rounded skill set. He looked good on the ground. He looked good standing. He was fast. So there wasn't much tape on Scott, but I was expecting Adam to come in and win that fight. But Scott really dominated the fight. He looked really good. He's got a quick shot. Some of his shots were from too far out, which I didn't like. But he's learning applying his trade, so he can be forgiven for some mistakes like that. I think that's something that he can work on. But he's got a really fast shot. He has really effective takedowns. He has a good top game. And his striking's not bad either. Adam's a very solid striker, and he dropped Adam at the end of the second round, and dropped him again in the third round, and followed up with ground and pound to get the stoppage. I went back and watched some of his previous fights. I watched his first fight in Cage Warriors against Jason Jenkins, where he won a decision back in March. Absolutely dominated Jason from the start of round 1 to the end of round 3. Just took him down, absolutely dominated him on the mat, pretty much in side control, half guard the whole time, complete domination. He was probably a bit disappointed he couldn't get the finish. He dominated so much. So complete domination. I also found another fight of his against Adam Bramhold from 2016 December, so 2 years ago now. Completely dominated that guy as well. Really good takedowns. Dominated him from top position. I think he got the finish from back mount, just pounded him out. And he's also got a Von Flue choke on his record, which was his second professional fight. He lost his debut, fought a French guy, then he fought a guy who was he had never fought professionally before, but still a Von Flue choke. So it shows he's definitely got a decent ground game, and we've seen that from his fights. Josh Reed, he's been on Cage Warriors for a while now. I'm pretty familiar with Josh. Some of you may have seen his fight with Nathaniel Wood, where it only goes for about 2 minutes, but it's an absolutely insane 2 minutes. They literally just rock 'em, sock 'em robots for 2 minutes, and eventually Nathaniel, who looks like he's on the verge of being stopped, comes back and manages to to stop him. Really, really great fight. If you haven't seen it, check it out. It's available on YouTube or Fight Pass, but great 2 minutes of action. Prior to that, I've seen he pretty much all his Cage Warriors fights. He fought Ben Reese in his Cage Warriors debut. Ben was overmatched, to be honest. Pretty comfortable win. He then had a very close fight with Martin Sheridan, who's a bit of a journeyman on the UK circuit. He got the better of the ground exchanges, but he lost the striking exchanges. He won a split decision. It could have gone either way. Then he beat Gavin Kelly, who I really don't rate at all. Knocked him out in the first round. Then he had the loss to Nathaniel Wood, knocked out. Then he had a loss to a Belgian fighter in his last fight called Brian Bouland. In that fight, he ended up on the bottom, got taken down. I think he kind of gave the takedown up because he was searching for a guillotine, and he got knocked out cold from the bottom. He has big power in his hands. We saw him knock out Gavin Kelly. We saw him nearly knock out Nathaniel Wood, and he also threw some big shots at Martin Sheridan. What I don't like about Josh Reed is the way he throws his strike. He kind of throws in spurts, and although he's got big power for a guy that fights at bantamweight, he is quite wild. He will throw a cluster of shots and then he'll kind of back off again, but he does have power. But I think from looking at Scott Malone's game, I think with his takedowns he's just going to come under Josh whenever he throws these spurts of punches. I think he'll get the takedowns at will. I see him being able to control the action on the mat. I think standing up, I think Scott can win the stand-up battle as well, but he does have to be careful with the power, because Josh can bang. He does hit hard, so he does have to be careful. But Josh does kind of run forward when he has these spurts, so I can just see Scott coming under and hitting a takedown pretty comfortably. So I'm definitely going with Scott here. He looks like a really good prospect. Needs to be careful with the power. He is in Wales, so hopefully he's not too intimidated by the atmosphere, because it's going to be a very partisan crowd. But definitely siding with Scott here. I'm really interested to see the betting line on this one, because Josh does have a bit of a reputation. He's been in Cage Warriors a while. He had that great fight with Nathaniel Wood, who we all know is now in the UFC, but there's question marks on his chin as well, so it wouldn't shock me if Scott managed to put him away standing, because Brian Bouland knocked him out cold with ground and pound, and then fight before that Nathaniel Wood knocked him out. So I'm not 100% convinced on his chin, but I expect Scott Malone to win this more from winning the ground battle. I think the sensible game plan here would be to take this fight to the mat as quickly as possible. I think he's easy to get taken down, so I don't see Scott having a problem hitting takedowns. I think he can dominate on the mat, and even if it is standing, I think as long as he's careful with those flurries, I think he wins the stand-up battle as well. So I'm going to go Scott Malone. I'm going to go decision, but I wouldn't be surprised with an inside the distance win. Next up, we've got Nicolas Dalby taking on SBG's Phillip Mulpeter. You all know who Dalby is, I'm sure. He was in the UFC. Had that fight with Darren Till that went to a draw. He was 2 rounds down. Darren's shoulder went, and he won the third round 10-8. So I don't like to look into that too much. But he's a solid fighter. He beat Zaleski. He lost 3 fights in a row and got cut. He lost to Zach Cummins, Peter Sabota. 2 fights in a row, in fact. Peter Sabota and Zach Cummins. Went to decision with both of them, but was just outclassed really. Dalby is very, very tough, very durable, has excellent cardio. At this kind of level, his takedown defence is very solid. After he got cut from the UFC, he disappeared for about 18 months. We didn't see him fight for. Maybe it was slightly over, maybe 20 months. He made his comeback against Carlo Pedasoli, who we know is now in the UFC. Very competitive fight. Really, really good fight. If you've got 15 minutes to spare, go and watch it. It's a really entertaining fight. He got dropped in that fight, but he came back. He kind of outlasted Pedasoli. Managed to take the third round, but he dropped the first 2 rounds. He had some difficulties in that layoff, I remember. I think he had a battle with alcoholism, so and I think he spoke openly about some mental health problems and so forth he may have had as well. So I remember I didn't bet him in the Pedasoli fight. He was a big favourite, but there was a lot of question marks about him coming back, where his mindset was at. He'd had the long layoff. Luckily I didn't bet him because he lost a split decision. I think Pedasoli won round 1 and 2. I don't really see why that was a split, but he came back, he showed his heart, he showed his durability, and he still showed his cardio. So it was a semi-impressive performance. His last fight he fought an Italian guy who was completely overmatched, to be fair. It was a bit of a flat round from Dalby, but he caught him with a head kick early in the second round and managed to finish him off. And here he is again, fighting for the third time in 2018 against SBG's Phillip Mulpeter. Phillip Mulpeter has been very inactive. He fought Ali Arish a year ago. It was his first fight for 2 years, basically. Hadn't fought in 2 years. A lot of cancelled fights in that time. Ali Arish, for those of you who don't know, is a strong wrestling base. He actually got wrestled by Mulpeter in that fight, so Mulpeter showed that he's got solid takedowns. Ali is really old now, but his kind of game revolves around his wrestling game. That's how he's won pretty much all of his fights, through his wrestling. So Mulpeter out wrestling him, fairly impressive on the regional circuit. He then came into Cage Warriors 6-7 months after that fight. Took on, I'm not going to try and pronounce the guy's surname, but a Belgian fighter. He won that fight in the third round by a rear naked choke, but it wasn't a great performance. He was possibly 1-1. He could have been 2 rounds down. He looked done at the end of the second round. He looked absolutely exhausted, so he done really well to pull the win out of the bag. But as solid as his takedowns are, he was getting taken down easily, gassed. I really don't see him having much for Dalby here. He's not going to be able to get Dalby down. Dalby's got, at this level, his takedown defence is solid, and if he does get taken down, his get-ups are good. His cardio is really good. Mulpeter's isn't. If Dalby will bring a higher pace, he's got the better stand-up. I think Dalby wins this by a KO. If not in the first round, I think in the second round, as Mulpeter starts to slow down. So definitely on Dalby. Be interesting to see what happens with Dalby after this fight. Will he get a title shot? I think he probably does. If they don't do the rematch with the guy that Houston fought the other month, I definitely think Dalby's in line for a title shot, and I see him winning the belt and maybe getting back in the UFC. So that'd be great to see. I really like Dalby. He's an entertaining fighter, tough guy. I'd like to see him back in the UFC. I think he can hang around at the lower end of the welterweight division, so be interested to see him back. So definitely going for Dalby here, knockout inside 2 rounds. Next, Aidan Khalid against Hakan Foss. Hakan Foss is a Norwegian fighter. He's had a few fights in Cage Warriors now. Hard to get a read on Hakan. Sometimes I think he looks okay, and in another fight he won't look so good. He lost last year to Craig White, who we've seen in the UFC twice now lose to Neil Magny and Diego Sanchez. Got choked out very quickly by Craig White. We then saw him lose to Jamie Richardson after a strong first round. Jamie overwhelmed him on the feet. And in last fight he beat Jack Mason, who had a bit of a layoff, and Jack probably needs to retire. He's had a few tough KO losses over the years, so it wasn't a huge surprise he was able to put Jack away there. Hakan, I don't think he's the greatest fighter. You don't know what version of him you're going to get. Aidan Khalid is a tough guy. He's never been finished in his career. He's very, very opportunistic. He's not the most solid fighter. He will drop around, but then he'll come back and pull the fight out of the fire. So it's going to be interesting. He had back-to-back losses to Ross Houston, both by decision. Ross is the welterweight champion now. Since then, he's had 2 wins in a row. He went away from Cage Warriors, won a fight in the first round, and then he came back and he choked out Jamie Richardson, who's a dangerous brawler. But he's very good on the floor, Khalid. He beat Adam Proctor, who's a very solid prospect, after being dominated for round 1. Just blink of an eye, turned it around in round 2 and managed to choke Proctor out. So I'm interested to see the betting line here. I think Khalid's going to be the underdog, but I'm not 100% sure, but I'd imagine he'll be the underdog, and if he is, Khalid is definitely worth a bet, because I think he is tough. He's never been stopped. I think he might have a difficult start to round one, or a difficult round one in general, but I can see him, where he's so opportunistic, I see him just catching Hakan at some point, whether it's off a fouled shot or he manages to get Hakan down. I think he will finish him. I think he can break him. He's tough, he's durable. He does gas Khalid, but I think Foss does as well from memory. So this could, if this does get out the first round, it could get a bit sloppy, and then that's when it's going to suit Khalid, because he kind of thrives in that chaos, those opportunistic moments. So I'm going to go Khalid by submission here. It definitely doesn't warrant a big bet. I think the line will be close-ish, but I see Khalid being the dog, and I think he's definitely worth a little sprinkle if he is the underdog. As a favourite, I don't know, it's probably a pass for me, but if I can get him as the underdog, I definitely think it's worth a sprinkle. Next, we've got the final of the featherweight tournament. So we've got Aidan taking on Dean Trueman. This is going to be a really entertaining fight while it lasts. Aidan is a very entertaining fighter. He's been in Cage Warriors for a while now. He's had quite a lot of fights there. He trains out of Leon Edwards' camp, Renegade BJJ. Aidan's been a little bit volatile in the cage. You kind of don't know what to expect from him. His fight IQ can be questionable. I'm hoping he's turning the corner now. He's only a young guy. He's looked solid his last two fights against Tom Mearns, and in his last fight just back in October against Paul McBain. He's got solid stand-up. He's got a crafty grappling game. What I don't like about his grappling is he doesn't show great fight IQ. He can go for risky stuff that can end up putting him on the bottom or out of position, or put him in a dangerous position. It paid off against Paul McBain. He managed to get the submission in the first round. He does need to be careful though with his positioning. I would prefer him to adopt more of a position over submission kind of strategy. Has cost him in the past. He lost to Donovan Desmay, Day as well, and he has shown that he does gas in fights. He looked better against Tom Mearns. Now that went to a decision, and Tom Mearns put a lot of pressure on him, and his gas tank seemed to hold up pretty well in that fight. So I'm hoping that maybe he's a bit more composed in there now. His breathing is settled, and it's going to help with his cardio, because he has slowed down. He slowed down against Day and Donovan Desmay, the two fights he lost. So I'm hoping his cardio is going to be on point. As I said, it was against Tom Mearns, and that was a high-paced fight. He's got very solid striking. He beat Kasper Formila, who's a really good striker. He absolutely dominated him. Pressured him really well. Put the pressure on him. Didn't let Kasper have space to get his kicks and so forth off. Pressured him, took him down, and wrapped up the rear naked choke. So when he's on form, he's really, really solid. But he has the Day loss we can maybe put down to being rookie loss early in his career. Donovan Desmay fight was up at 155, so maybe there was a bit of a strength disadvantage there, and he suffered because of it. But he's moved back down. He's looked really solid at 145. Dean Trueman is a solid enough fighter. He has got to the final. He had a win over Lewis Monarch in his last fight back in October. Just dominated Lewis for the 3 rounds. Corey Neaton before that dominated him for 3 rounds as well. He's a dangerous guy, Dean. He's trains with Jimmy Woolhead up in Leicester. He's 9-4 record, but the last few years he's only got the 1 loss. That was to a Swedish fighter, and he nearly armbarred the guy. It was really, really close to finishing with I think it was an armbar, and then he ended up getting choked out in the first round. The guy turned it around, but he's definitely looked solid the last few years. I do think Aidan is going to win this fight though. Aidan will be the favourite. I can't bet Aidan as a moderate favourite, which I expect him to be here, just because I just want to see the gas tank issues completely dispelled. I need to see higher fight IQ on the ground. He he does take risks that can end up putting him on bottom and so forth, and he could end up giving the round away. Be interesting to see strategy here, because I think he is the better striker. I think he could keep this on the feet and win a decision, or even stop Dean. I think on the ground it'd be quite entertaining, because Dean's pretty good on the ground himself. Aidan's maybe a little bit more opportunistic. He will, as I said earlier, he'll put submission over position. But Dean isn't a safety first fighter on the mat either, so on the mat it'd be very entertaining. But I think Aidan should probably try and keep this fight standing. I am going to pick Aidan to win the featherweight strap here, but as I said, I expect he's going to be a moderate favourite, so I can't bet him. If it's more of an even line, definitely, but I expect Aidan to be a favourite here. But yeah, I've just got some reservations just on his fight IQ and his gas tank, and this is probably going to be a high paced fight. It is for the belt, so it's going to be 5 rounds as well. So if we start getting into the latter rounds and Aidan starts slowing down, could get very interesting. So probably one I'm going to pass on, as Aidan's going to be the favourite, I imagine. But it's definitely going to be an entertaining fight. But I do expect Aidan to walk away as the featherweight champion. Last fight of the night is Jack Shaw taking on Mike Ekundayo. This is for the bantamweight belt that's been vacated by Nathaniel Wood since moving to the UFC. So Mike Ekundayo actually trains with Nathaniel Wood out of Titan, an MMA gym in London that's got a lot of good lighter fighters. It's the camp that Brad Pickett coaches out of now. Mike's 24, he's 7-0 as a professional. I went back and watched Mike's last 4 fights. I found he has a very, very wrestling heavy style. He reminds me of Fabinski, the UFC guy from Poland. He doesn't engage on the feet at all. I've barely seen him throw a punch. He straight away is just looking for the takedown, basically. I watched his fight against Gerdip Shergill, just really wrestling heavy approach there. He got hurt by a big knee at one point, kind of got dropped but recovered very quickly. Took Gerdip back down, just won a comfortable decision pretty much from top position, had his back as well. Fought Jonas Magard, a Danish fighter. Competitive first round. He got taken down, he got a takedown himself. Second round, quick takedown, back take, finished with a choke. Then he fought in Bellator against Tom Mearns. He took Tom down, went for a guillotine. Tom escaped, ended up on top, and Tom absolutely dominated from top position. This was only back in May. Had mount for pretty much all of round 1. Round 2, he took Mearns down, and Mearns posted his arm, and his arm just broke like the Shoguns did against Mark Coleman many years ago off of a takedown, so the fight got stopped. That would have been a very interesting fight, because he was down around in that fight, and Tom Mearns is pretty good. He's a very aggressive fighter. He gave Aidan Lee, who we just talked about, a tough fight, and his last fight was in Cage Warriors. He fought Ed Arthur, who Arthur had been out for a couple of years, but Ed, solid enough fighter. He's fought in ACB. He fought Peter Yan, lost the decision to Peter Yan. He fought Turul Magimov, another tough fighter, lost the decision to him as well. And now Mike's come in and won a decision over him. So Mike pretty much dominated with the wrestling again. So yeah, he seems like a solid wrestler, decent top control. But most of his fights he's been taken down. I'm not sold on how good his bottom game is. As I said, Tom Mearns had Mant for the whole of round 1, and he just hasn't shown any stand up whatsoever. He just straight away he's looking to wrestle, basically. So how good is he striking if he's forced to strike? I imagine it's not great, because literally I've barely seen him throw a punch. He's facing Jack Shaw. Jack's fighting at home here in Wales. Jack's kind of been a bit of a poster boy for Cage Warriors. Been on an absolute tear. He's unbeaten as an amateur like Mike is. He's unbeaten as a pro like Mike is as well. We've seen Jack in a number of Cage Warriors fights now. He's pretty much run through everyone. except for Vaughan Lee, which went to a 3-round decision. You may recall Vaughan Lee is a UFC veteran. He's getting up there in age now, probably out of his physical prime. But Jack won a pretty comfortable 30-27 decision. He destroyed Conman Day in his Cage Warrior. It wasn't his Cage Warriors debut actually. His whole career's pretty much been in Cage Warriors, but Conman Day was his first kind of step up. Conman Day beat Aidan Lee, who we've just discussed. Jack absolutely destroyed him, dominated him with his wrestling, armbarred him before the end of the first round. He has fought some questionable opposition since. He's fought a couple of Italian guys. I remember doing tape on both, and you just knew he was going to maul these guys. Then he had the Vaughan Lee fight, which was a step up for him, albeit a bit of a faded Vaughan Lee, but a comfortable win. And then last fight he had a late notice replacement against a guy that shouldn't have been in there with him, who's a flyweight, just mauled him. So I did think before I did tape that I'm going to be on Jack Shaw big here, but I'm not. I'm interested to see the betting line. I'm guessing Jack Shaw's going to be around a -200 favourite. I am going to put Jack Shaw in a double with someone, but it will be relatively small. We haven't really seen Jack's takedown defence. It's not been tested. We haven't seen him from bottom either. He's going to have his takedown defence tested here, and we're probably going to see his bottom game as well. This is a step up for him. I'd say it's his toughest opponent of his career, so we're going to see how he does on the takedown defence and bottom game side of things. Both these guys started out at featherweight and have moved down to bantamweight. Bantamweight looks a better division for both of them, definitely. Jack was carrying maybe a little bit of fat at featherweight. He definitely looks trimmer at bantamweight. But I just can't go big because I don't know how good his takedown defence is. I don't know what he's like from the bottom. Mike is going to be straight away on him. Striking, I have to give it to Jack because we just haven't seen Mike stand up. So if Jack can keep this fight standing, I think he wins it. This is a 5-round fight as well. Also, Mike, as I said, was taken down in most of the fights I watched, so Jack can definitely take him down. And Jack, you can just tell that Jack is a pretty high-level grappler. Even though I've questioned some of his opposition, he's absolutely mauled them with his positioning, his submission game. Whereas Mike, I find, is a bit more methodical on the mat, isn't quite as sharp on the submission side of things. And as I said, Mike was mounted for the whole of round 1 against Tom Mann. So if Mike ends up on the bottom here, I would not be surprised to see Jack dominate and get a submission. So I am going to pick Jack. I do think he can win the striking. I think he can put Mike on his back, where I think Mike could be in trouble. The only way I really see Mike winning this fight is a 5-round decision. I don't think he's going to submit Jack, and he's going to have to do enough to win 3 of the rounds with his wrestling. He's going to have to keep Jack down. How good is Jack going to be getting back to his feet? I've got a feeling he's going to be decent off of his back. So I'm going to definitely pick Jack here. I think he can get the submission win. I think he's got more paths to victory, and I think he's the more well-rounded fighter. But it's definitely going to answer some questions about his takedown defence and get-up game. If Jack does win this, I don't think he's ready for the UFC. I think he should. He's only young. I think he's 23. I think he should have a few more fights at least. Nathaniel Wood has made the move to the UFC, but Nathaniel has knockout power. He's got heavy hands, which is quite unique for the featherweight division. Jack doesn't have that power, so he's probably going to have to rely on his ground and wrestling, and it's just really hard to dominate guys at featherweight at that level with wrestling and ground control. You really need to be well-rounded, and I'm not saying Jack stand-up is okay, but just lacks power. He's not the most athletic guy either, so he's not incredibly fast. So I would like to imply his trade a little bit more on the Cage Warrior side and have a few more step-ups to, against guys that have maybe been in the UFC or kind of bordering on that level as Jack is, just to see where he's at. I don't want to see him rushed, but I do think he wins here. He's got the partisan crowd as well. I hope the pressure doesn't get to him. He's fought in Wales a lot for Cage Warrior, so I'm sure he'll be fine. But I do expect him to come away with, I think he's going to get the submission at some point here. He's got 5 rounds. I definitely think Mike's going to end up on his back at times, and based on that Tom Mearns fight, which was only 6 months ago, I think he's going to be in trouble with Jack on top of him. So I'm going to go with Jack Shaw submission. Guys, we're on Twitter at Pro MMA Betting. The website is prommabetting.com. Tips are being released for this week's show for the UFC. We'll have Cage Warriors tips up as well once the odds come out. So please have a look on the website. You can see the membership packages there. We're the world's highest stakes MMA and boxing tipster. We're going to have a big bet on the boxing this weekend as well. So have a look at the website. Any questions, drop me an email. Sign up and you will get the tips. Hope you've enjoyed the breakdown, and I'll be back next week for the UFC in Milwaukee. Cheers guys, bye.